The United Kingdom invented the Industrial Revolution. It created modern parliamentary democracy. For over a century, it was literally the center of the map, not by accident, but because they were the ones drawing the maps. On paper, it's a superpower, but the people actually living inside this country are among the most dissatisfied they've been in decades. Growth has barely moved. Inflation came back right when it looked like the worst was behind them. The national debt is now larger than everything the country produces in an entire year. And the government that won one of the biggest electoral landslides in British history just suffered one of the worst local election defeats in British history, 2 years later. This isn't just a rough patch. This is something else. So what is really going on with the UK? Why has a country with so many built-up advantages ended up here? And why does it seem like the longer this goes on, the harder it gets to climb back out? Open any newspaper today and the blame is always the same: the war in the Middle East. And that makes sense, it's causing real damage. Energy bills went up, rent went up, the grocery run covers less than it did 6 months ago. And at the same time, the central bank says it can't cut rates because inflation is still nowhere near where it should be. That's the dead end the UK is stuck in right now. The numbers confirm it. Inflation hit 3.3% in March and is on track to reach 3.6% by the end of the year, nearly double the Bank of England's target. And the most immediate root cause is gas. The UK never broke its structural dependence on this commodity. When gas prices rise anywhere on the planet, it shows up on energy bills in Manchester before any government policy can respond. This isn't theory. This is what's happening right now. And the Bank of England has no good way out. Raise rates to fight inflation? It squeezes credit for people already at their limit. Hold rates steady? Inflation risks becoming permanent. Most economists still expect the bank to hold rates at 3.75% for the rest of the year, but in April, only 23% thought a rate hike was coming. Today, it's nearly 40%. In 1 month, expectations shifted completely. The bank's own chief economist broke with his colleagues at the last meeting and voted to raise rates now. That's not a technical detail. It's a sign that even the people making the decisions don't know what to do. And when the people who are supposed to have the answers don't have them, the signal reaching businesses and workers is simple: don't take risks right now. But here's the problem with that whole narrative. If the war were the real cause of the UK's problems, the solution would be simple: wait for it to end. War ends, things go back to normal. Except the normal the country wants to go back to was never that good to begin with. The truth is more uncomfortable than any war headline. Months before any bombs fell, back in June 2025, the OECD was already projecting UK growth dropping to 1% in 2026. Not because of any war, because of trade tensions and tighter financial conditions that already existed. The government was already spending far more than it was taking in, and every year that passed, the tab kept growing. Debt was already climbing toward 100% of GDP. Businesses were already losing confidence. Consumers were already pulling back. The war arrived in a country that was already stumbling. It didn't open the hole. It found the hole wide open and fell right in. The deeper problem, the one that almost never makes the front page, is productivity. Since the 2008 financial crisis, UK productivity has simply stopped growing. That's nearly 20 years. And productivity isn't just economist talk, it's what determines whether your real wages grow or stay flat. It's what determines whether the public healthcare system can function without borrowing more money. It's the foundation of everything. When it stalls for 2 decades, the effects show up everywhere. They just take time to become visible enough to make headlines. And they did. Not in IMF reports, in people's wallets, in hospital waiting rooms, and on the roads they drive every day. This feeling of decline isn't hitting everyone the same way. The gap between those at the top and those in the middle is one of the largest in the developed world. When the economy tightens, people at the top have a cushion. People living paycheck to paycheck feel it immediately. Services inflation hit 5.4% year-on-year through April. Services are transit, rent, healthcare, Education, exactly what working people spend most of their money on. This isn't abstract. It's the bus that got more expensive, the doctor's appointment that became unaffordable, the rent that went up more than the last pay raise. And on top of all that, British people are paying more in taxes than at any point in recent history, and the trajectory isn't pointing down. The question that no one in government can answer is, in exchange for what exactly? People who need the NHS are still waiting longer than they were before the pandemic years later. And at the local level, the deterioration is so concrete it shows up literally on the ground. 37% of British people in a recent survey named the state of the roads as the single most important issue in their area. Half the road network can't even be classified as being in good condition. It's the potholes people drive over every day, not IMF reports, that turn economic abstraction into political rage. And that's exactly what explains what came next. The economic problem would be hard enough on its own. What makes it nearly impossible to solve is what's happening in politics at the same time. Governing a country in crisis requires one very specific thing: the willingness to make decisions that hurt today in order to fix tomorrow. Cut where it hurts, reform what's broken, tell voters a truth they don't want to hear. The IMF was explicit about this: when no one knows what the government is going to do next week, people stop planning. A business that doesn't know if the government lasts another 12 months delays expansion. An anxious worker saves instead of spends. Political instability isn't just a symptom of the economic crisis. It's also a cause of it. And that's the trap. The solutions aren't a mystery: build more housing where people actually want to live, reform the benefit system so that working pays more than not working, retrain the people left behind over the last 2 decades. The IMF and the OECD have mapped all of this out exhaustively. The problem is that every one of those solutions will hurt someone before it helps anyone. And no politician fighting for their own political survival is going to sign off on that right now. A government that needs to exist tomorrow can't govern for 10 years from now. In the UK in 2026, that trap is locked shut. And underneath all of this is a problem that will outlast any government or any war: the debt. The UK today is like a household that earns £100,000 a year, but owes £104,000 on the credit card. Almost everything coming in goes straight to paying interest on the past before paying a teacher, a doctor, or fixing a road. The money that should be serving the present is serving old debts. To stop sinking, the government had to cut the equivalent of 1.2% of GDP between 2024 and 2026. That money had to come from somewhere. Among other places, it came from benefits for people living with disabilities. Real people receiving less at a time when everything got more expensive. And the long-term picture is heavier still. Just the pressures of an aging population, rising defense spending, and the climate transition are projected to require an additional 6% of GDP by 2050, even with no new crisis along the way. And here's the bind. The IMF itself has warned that raising taxes isn't a way out anymore. The practical ceiling has been reached, so someone is going to have to choose what gets cut. And the people entering the workforce right now are the ones who will inherit that choice. And here's what makes this case genuinely frustrating. The UK has what it needs to recover and still can't use it. The banks are solid. The toughest stress tests show the financial system holding up. The 2008 style collapse, the kind that freezes credit and locks down the whole economy, isn't on the horizon. The problem isn't that the system is breaking, it's that it's functioning inside a structure that wastes most of its potential. The reform diagnosis is correct. The IMF says the government is looking at the right areas: housing, skills, innovation, energy security. The OECD agrees. The treatment is prescribed. The patient just keeps refusing the medicine because it's bitter and because there's always an election just around the corner. That, more than any projection, is what's really falling apart. So is the UK economy actually falling apart? Yes, but not the way the phrase suggests. The country isn't on the edge of a financial collapse. The banks are standing. The pound still exists. The country isn't going to break tomorrow. What's falling apart is something more subtle and, for that reason, much harder to fix: the political system's ability to do difficult things in the name of the long term. Stalled growth, inflation refusing to fall, debt that will demand painful choices for decades, a government that lost political authority before completing 2 years in office. All of that in a country that has the right diagnosis, the right tools, and still can't act. This isn't an ordinary economic crisis, it's a governance crisis. And governance crises are the slowest to build and the hardest to reverse. The UK still has solid institutions, deeply connected financial markets, and world-class universities. Those things don't disappear because of a few hard years, but they erode gradually, silently when they're neglected long enough. And the question this video can't answer, because the answer is still being written, is whether the country will act before that erosion becomes permanent. If this video made sense to you, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more analysis like this coming. And drop a comment. What do you think is going to happen to the UK in the next few years? Thanks for watching.